Rev up your engines! All right, here we have a 2002 Camry. The guy bought it 10 years ago for 10 grand, but he's put almost $20,000 into it, maintaining and fixing stuff. What went wrong, and how can you learn from his mistakes? Here we go. Well, now he bought it with 60-something thousand miles on it for 10 grand, but at about 110,000 miles, the transmission went out and he had to have it rebuilt. Normally Toyotas last longer than that, but there were two things going on here. The first thing is, obviously the previous owners did not maintain it. His mechanic told him at 120,000 miles when it started acting up, the fluid's black. He says, I'm not going to change it because then it might not even move down the road. So he ended up having it rebuilt. Now, if the original owners did it correctly, if they only would have changed the transmission filter and fluid, say every 40,000 miles on this old one, they were using more basic fluid. The fluids today are better than these older fluids. It probably wouldn't have had any problems at all. That's number one. And number two is, that's one of the reasons I really advise people, if they're going to buy a Camry, don't get the V6. Get the 4-cylinder engine. The V6 has more horsepower, strains the transmission more. I have seen 4-cylinder Camrys with 250,000 miles on them. They've never had the transmission fluid touched, these old ones, and they still weren't all that black and they shifted fine. You have to take better care of the transmissions if you got a V6 engine. There's more torque, they get more wear creates black, and then he had to spend thousands to rebuild the transmission. It's working fine now, but that's something to warn you about. You're going to buy one of these used, look at the 4-bangers. They got enough pickup, they're not slow, and they generally don't get the transmission problems that a bigger V6 is going to have. Now the next problem he had was the brake rotors kept warping, sometimes as quickly as 5,000 miles. Now again, the V6 engines are going to wear them out faster. They weigh more. These do have a tendency of warping. Now he did learn one lesson though. He switched the rotors recently to Brembo rotors, which are good rotors, but instead of 5,000 miles, now he's like 15,000 miles, and they're warping again. He needs to go one step further. And I have to chastise his mechanic on this one, because the guy turned the rear rotors and put semi-metallic pads on it. Don't ever use semi-metallic pads unless you're a race car driver. You're going to change the rotors after every race. Metal eats up. They'll wear out faster. Now, the front, he had Brembo rotors and Brembo brake pads, but the Accabono ceramic pads are the best pads, being quiet, stopping perfectly, but being ceramic, not wearing the rotors as fast. I'll give you an example. I changed the rotors out on my son's old Camry that my grandson's driving, right? He bought it new. The rotors warped at about 14,000 miles. Then I just put on regular rotors, but Accabono brake pads. And it went well over 100,000 miles. Something about Accabono brake pads. They know how to make the certain ceramic configuration that Accabono uses. They really don't warp stuff much. And here's the strangest thing of them all. A lot of times you can use the cheap rotors with them, and the cheap rotors won't even warp because they just dissipate heat better, and the ceramic Accabonos do not wear them unevenly, so they warp, and then your steering wheel starts shaking when you're braking. So a lot of people don't understand brake pad material is probably even more important than getting the most expensive rotors. Because even the cheap rotors are made out of cast iron. That stuff's strong, you know? It's not like it's weak, it's strong stuff. It's the pads that are one of the biggest things. So, if you don't like noise, you want rotors that don't warp as much, go Accabono. They're going to cost a bit more, but hey, rotors are a pain to change. You won't have to deal with all that stuff. Now, he's on his second set of front tires. He's still got the first set that he bought in the back. And that's normal wear and tear. That you expect. I mean, you'd expect that on any car. Now, he wanted a good ride. So, he had all 4 struts done with Bilsteins, and he said the total bill was about $2,500. Well, he's got one complaint. One of the rear ones is starting to leak. And it hasn't been on there all that long. Now, as I check in here, I can feel in the strut, and there's just a little tiny bit that's a little seeping, where when we go to the other side, it's still bone dry, but it doesn't have any particular bounce at all. It's still pretty stiff. A lot of times you'll get a little seepage these days. The seals are made to seep a little bit so the seal doesn't run dry. Otherwise the rod's going up and down on a dry seal will blow it out and it'll all leak out. And there's nothing dripping on the bottom. You got to take the boot up and reach inside to feel a little bit of it. So it's nothing outrageous. Wonder whether you should keep this thing as old as it is. But I mean, they sure know how to paint these things. It's still got phenomenal paint job on it. It doesn't burn oil between oil changes. And the AC, it still blows freezing cold. Of course it's dated. Toyota was putting CDs. Check it out. It's got a tape deck too. Most of you young people have no idea what a tape is. Magnetic tapes that played music. But the leather interior, that's still in decent shape. The engine's still relatively quiet. Now realize, yes, it is a timing belt, so you gotta change it every once in a while. He had that done at 90,000 miles. But this is not a worrisome engine because it's a 3-liter Toyota V6. It is a non-interference engine. If the timing belt broke, you'd be stranded, but it wouldn't hurt the engine one iota. You would just take it apart, put a new belt on. It would not hurt anything. So it's not like one of those Honda V6s that they still use to this day in Odyssey and stuff. That's a rubber timing belt V6 that's an interference engine. You don't have to worry about that if you don't want to change it. Sometimes I've seen these things with 300,000 miles in the original belt, which has never snapped, so you never know. It won't hurt anything. Had the starter changed. That's normal wear and tear. But looks to me that the alternator's pretty old. So it's still got the original alternator. So here we go with our fancy scan tool all plugged in. So here we go. Notice it's Camry 02. And we'll do an automatic scan. Here we go. Well, it's a typical Camry. Everything is green. Start it up. We'll start looking at the data. Now, he did say he had one small problem. That every once in a while, goes fast, comes to stop, it would stall out on him. Well, I told him, I said, yeah, the fuel injectors might be dripping a little fuel. Well, it looks like my guess was spot on. The short-term fuel trim, it's subtracting 4.72%, sometimes 3.9%. And then the other side, on number 2, it's subtracting 3.9. And you can see up here now it's minus 5.5. Minus 4.72. Now that's not outrageous, but it's a Toyota. I've seen some of these things running almost 99% efficiency, even when they're older than this, right? So it's running a little bit rich. I'd say the best thing to do, watch my video, make your car run better with a little spray cleaner. You can spray clean the throttle and the mass airflow sensor and throw some of Bernie's ATS Albuquerque fuel cleaner in the gas tank. I generally think it's going to stop stalling on it. It only does it once in a while. And his mechanic back in Texas says, well, there's no codes or data that I can see. Well, this shows you that it is, like I said, running a little bit rich. When it subtracts fuel, it's subtracting it because it sees the engine's running a little bit rich. The oxygen sensors sense there's a little bit too much on-burn fuel, so it tries to lean it up. Say not outrageous, but a little bit. We'll look at some more data. The math looks good. It's a 3-liter engine. It should be around 3, 2.96. That's as close as you're going to get them. The air fuel trim, hey, it's pretty close. 1.00 is perfect. And there it is, 0.99. It's pretty close for an old car. And whoever rebuilt the transmission did a pretty good job. You can see there's no transmission codes at all stored. No misfire, 0.00. And it shows out of the 6 cylinders, they're all 0.2 individually. See the computer that's testing the airflow meter. Both tests have completed and passed. So all in all, it's in excellent shape. Let's take it for a spin. Now, the inside steering wheel is typical. That's just the leather and rubber rubbing, they do that. But you did have to have the whole steering wheel column assembly replaced, which I find weird, but then he told me he had 2 shops working on the suspension. Then one of them said, oh, well, the steering's broken, so we got to replace all that. I'm assuming they broke it when they did the work, because that's pretty rare on one of these. Now, if it had been a Sienna van, the older Sienna vans, the second part of the steering column often breaks, and then when you turn them here, they go clunk, clunk, clunk. It didn't do that when he took it in, so I'm assuming they screwed that one up. So here we go. We'll roll up the windows, get a little silence. Still rides quite well. Corners quite well. The one thing people say, these are kind of boaty cars. You can see they do have a tendency of understeering. Now I can hear the wheel bearings in the back are going out though. Hear that? The rear wheel bearings are starting to wear out. Now it does have 142,000 miles on it. That's kind of typical. It's got decent power. We'll stop here, see what it's got. Not bad. Still a nice smooth riding car. Like I said, doesn't burn any oil. You did have to have the transmission overhauled, but as you can see, it downshifts good, they'll pass. Then it upshifts pretty smooth. The AC's blowing freezing cold. Still a nice riding car. Those Bilsteins are pretty good shock absorbers. You want to replace them with high quality ones, you can't argue them. They're expensive, but they do give a better ride. I'll tell him he should keep it. I wouldn't use one, or he should get rid of it. A little cleaning, still runs perfectly fine. AC is cold, and his little bit of a glitch that he's got is probably because it's running just a little bit too rich, and that should certainly fix it out. You get too much fuel when you're decelerating, it can make it conk out because it floods it out. There's no serious codes, anything on this vehicle. And even though it's old, it's a Toyota, they're well made. I mean, if you're worried and you're buying a used one, do road test it with the transmission, and if you listen to me in the beginning, buy one with a 4 instead of a 6-cylinder engine, because their transmissions have a tendency of lasting quite a bit longer and having less blips in them, because even my wife's Lexus, which is the same year as this Camry, same color too really, it has the occasional tranny glitch in it, and we just live with it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.